Usually, when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of absolute precision.
Right. It's very clinical.
Exactly.
Mm.
You go into a clinic, they take a scan, and you get an answer. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points to the screen.
They just say, there's the problem.
Yeah, there it is. It's almost like engineering. It's clean.
Yeah.
But then you step into the world of navigating a physical crisis in a foreign language, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just fundamentally broken.
You don't have that luxury anymore.
No, not at all. You can't just point at a screen. You are forced to translate these raw, terrifying physiological sensations into a vocabulary you barely possess.
You're trying to hand over a map of your pain to a complete stranger.
Which is just wild to think about. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We've got a stack of source material today that completely reframes how we think about language.
It really does. It's fascinating.
It's from a program called LearnCast English. We're looking at a transcript of an extended version of their episode 6.
Right. Which is ostensibly about public transportation.
Yeah, it's designed as listening and speaking practice for beginners focusing on transit. But it also carries over this massive review of their episode 5.
And that one is entirely about navigating a hospital.
Exactly. And the juxtaposition in the source material is just, well, what makes it so incredibly compelling to you?
Well, by pairing the hospital review directly with the mechanics of a transit system, the lesson designers have isolated really the two absolute bedrock pillars of human agency.
Physical health and geographical mobility.
Precisely. We often think of language learning as this, cultural pursuit.
Like ordering coffee or chatting about the weather.
Right. Understanding local song lyrics, that kind of thing. But this transcript just strips all of that away. It throws us into the absolute deep end of human vulnerability.
Because if you can't do those two things, you're stuck.
Exactly. If your body fails, or if you cannot navigate your environment, you are entirely paralyzed. You become a captive to your surroundings.
Okay, let's unpack this for the listener. Imagine being dropped into a massive, overwhelmingly complex video game, right? But someone has hidden the controller manual.
That's a perfect analogy.
The environment is constantly moving, the stakes are completely real, the map is obscured in fog, and suddenly your health bar is blinking red.
And you have no idea how to heal.
You don't even know what buttons to press. This
Yeah.
transcript we're unpacking today, it's the exact sequence of key codes you need to interact with the NPCs and survive.
The locals, the doctors, the transit workers.
Yeah, we aren't looking at a simple grammar lesson here. We are decoding a survival manual.
And if you're listening to this right now, I really want you to put yourself in that headspace.
Yeah, imagine you are in a city where you do not speak the native tongue. You are profoundly sick. Or you are lost miles underground in a concrete labyrinth of a subway system.
Mastering these specific phrases isn't about passing a test. It is the literal mechanism of saving yourself.
So we really have to start where the source text starts. Before we can even attempt to explore the city, we have to secure the vessel.
The human body has to be intact first.
Right. So the material kicks off with this intense review of medical English, and it gives the learner these very broad, kind of blunt distress phrases.
Like, I feel very sick.
Yeah, I feel very sick. I need to see a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Or I have a fever and my whole body aches.
Those phrases, they serve as the absolute baseline of systemic triage.
You're just firing a flare into the sky.
Exactly. You aren't diagnosing yourself yet. You are simply alerting the surrounding social structure that your biological system is feeling.
You're saying, I require immediate intervention.
Right. In the hierarchy of human needs, this is the very bottom layer of the pyramid. You were just establishing the premise of the emergency.
I was looking at these phrases, though, specifically the ones that describe intense physical disorientation. And it hit me how wild the cognitive demand is here.
Oh, the cognitive load is immense.
The text explicitly teaches the phrase, I feel dizzy and I can't stand up properly.
Which is terrifying to experience.
Right. Think about the biological reality of that moment. When your inner ear is failing, when you literally cannot maintain your balance, your brain is panicking.
It's in full survival mode.
Yes. So to ask someone in that exact moment of intense physical vertigo to override their panic, access a secondary language database in their brain, conjugate the verbs correctly, and clearly enunciate, I feel dizzy and I can't stand up properly. I mean, isn't that incredibly daunting?
It feels almost cruel, honestly, to require perfect syntax when you can't even stand up.
Exactly.
What's fascinating here is that the staggering cognitive load is precisely why rote memorization of these specific phrases is so vital.
You mean independent of actually understanding the underlying grammar?
Yes, completely independent of it. We really have to look at the neuroscience of extreme stress here.
Okay, yeah, let's get into that.
Under extreme physical duress, like when you are running a high fever, experiencing acute pain, or suffering from severe vertigo, your brain's executive function degrades rapidly.
It just shuts down.
Basically, yeah. The prefrontal cortex, which handles complex tasks like dynamically constructing a sentence in a second language, essentially powers down.
Just to conserve energy.
Exactly, to conserve energy for basic survival mechanisms. You completely lose the ability to search your mental dictionary for the perfect adjective.
Or to figure out the correct tense.
Right. You cannot build a sentence from scratch in that state. You need pre-compiled, pre-packaged linguistic tools that you can deploy instantly.
Like a reflex.
Almost reflexively, yes, without engaging the higher-order processing centers of the brain. You aren't really speaking English at that point.
You are deploying a survival protocol.
Exactly.
It's like having an emergency brake pre-installed. You don't need to know how the brake lines work, you know? You just need to know how to pull the lever.
That's a great way to put it.
But what's really interesting is how the source material doesn't just stop at the flare gun. It forces the learner to narrow the scope.
The progression of the language taught is very strategic.
It moves from those blunt statements like, I don't feel well, to highly precise, localized pain descriptions.
Like, my throat really hurts.
Right. Or I have a sharp pain in my chest. My stomach hurts after I eat. My leg is swollen and it's hard to walk.
That shift from the general to the specific is the essence of medical triage.
Because when you walk into an ER and say, I feel sick, you're just a generic data point.
You're a data point that needs processing, yes. You take a number and wait. But when you say, I have a sharp pain in my chest,
Oh, you instantly bypass the waiting room.
instantly, you have handed the medical professionals a highly specific diagnostic key that triggers a massive systemic algorithm.
To rule out a heart attack, right.
Exactly, a myocardial infarction. The lesson designers are equipping the learner with the precise vocabulary needed to manipulate the triage system in their favor.
And notice the modifier there, too. A sharp pain.
Yes, the transcript doesn't just teach the word pain, it differentiates the texture of the pain.
A sharp pain implies something acute, something potentially tearing or puncturing.
Which dictates a completely different set of immediate medical actions than, say, a dull ache.
I'm glad you brought up the modifiers because there's one phrase in this medical section that completely threw me. I want to hear your take on it.
Oh, which one?
The text teaches the phrase, the pain gets worse at night.
Yes.
When I first read that, I assumed it was just a temporal thing. Like, obviously pain feels worse at night because the house is quiet, you're lying in bed, you have no distractions.
So your brain just hyper-focuses on it.
Right, you hyper-focus on your sore knee or whatever. It feels like a psychological observation rather than a medical one. Why would a beginner English lesson prioritize that specific sentence?
Well, because your assumption, while very common, is medically incomplete. And the designers of this curriculum know that.
Okay, how so?
In the realm of diagnostic medicine, nocturnal pain, pain that specifically awakens a patient from sleep or intensifies when they assume a recumbent position, is considered a classic red flag symptom.
Wait, really? It's not just psychological?
Not at all. It is a critical diagnostic clue. If a patient presents with back pain that only hurts when they lift boxes, the doctor will likely diagnose a musculoskeletal strain.
Sure, that makes sense.
But if the patient states the pain gets worse at night, the diagnostic algorithm completely shifts.
What?
Nocturnal pain can be a primary indicator of systemic inflammatory conditions, certain aggressive types of bone infections, or even malignancies and tumors.
Oh, wow. Tumors.
Yes, things that swell and press on nerves, specifically when the body is horizontal and resting.
I had no idea.
By equipping a language learner with this highly specific temporal phrase, the lesson is handing them a tool that drastically alters the physician's investigative pathway.
That is wild. It actually changes the entire medical investigation. I mean, it looks so innocuous on the page.
It just looks like basic time-telling vocabulary mixed with a complaint, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's arguably one of the highest value sentences in the entire review section then.
Absolutely. The language itself is doing the heavy lifting for the patient's healthcare. It proves that the architects of this transcript deeply understand medical triage, not just grammar,
They are teaching patients how to survive a clinical encounter.
which is life-saving.
That makes the next part of the source material even more critical, because after it gives you these phrases, it actually drops you into a simulated interaction.
The illustrative Q&A?
Yeah, between a doctor and a patient.
Yeah.
The scenario is set up so the patient has to describe an ongoing, continuous issue.
Right.
The patient states, I've been sneezing a lot and my nose is runny, and the doctor's immediate follow-up is, how long have you felt like this?
And the taught response is, it started about 3 days ago.
Exactly.
Well-
We are back to time being the ultimate diagnostic metric. But then the simulation escalates. The doctor asks about allergies.
Establishing the biochemical baseline.
That is exactly what it is. The patient in the dialogue has to explicitly declare, yes, I'm allergic to penicillin.
Crucial information.
And right after that, they volunteer another piece of vital data. They say, I take medicine for high blood pressure.
When you look at those two sentences side by side, it is terrifying how much is riding on the correct pronunciation of a few syllables.
It really is. I mean, if a learner mispronounces a word while ordering a sandwich, they get the wrong sandwich.
Exactly. But if a learner fails to properly articulate allergic to penicillin,
Or forgets to mention their blood pressure meds.
the consequences can be fatal. Administering penicillin to an allergic patient will trigger anaphylaxis, which is a massive and potentially lethal immune response.
And what about the blood pressure medicine?
Prescribing a new counteragent without knowing the patient's current blood pressure regimen can induce a catastrophic drug interaction. It could plummet their blood pressure to dangerous levels.
The transcript is drilling home a fundamental reality of modern medicine here. You are not a blank slate when you walk into a clinic.
No, you are a highly complex, highly volatile chemical system.
You have an ongoing biochemical narrative. And you absolutely must be able to explain the existing variables to the physician before they introduce new chemicals into your system.
It's the ultimate vulnerability. You are handing over the operating manual to your own biology.
What really struck me about this transcript, though, is that it doesn't just abandon the learner once the doctor writes the prescription.
Right, it pushes into post-care logistics.
Yeah, it literally labels it after the doctor's visit. And I think this is where the material shows a lot of empathy for the learner.
It acknowledges that healing is not strictly a biological event,
It's an intensely logistical process.
especially when you are attempting to heal within the framework of a foreign healthcare bureaucracy.
The phrases here are deeply practical, but they also highlight the friction of daily life. The learner is taught to ask, do I need to take this medicine every day?
And when should I come back for a checkup?
But the phrase that really anchors this section for me is, should I rest at home or go back to work? That isn't a medical question, really. That is a purely economic question. It touches on the harsh reality of being a traveler or a newcomer.
You might be sick, but the rent is still due.
Exactly. You need the authority figure, the doctor, to essentially grant you official, systemic permission to step away from your economic responsibilities.
You're asking for a medical pardon from the demands of capitalism, essentially.
Yeah. And in many cultures, you need that explicit written authorization from a physician just to justify your absence to an employer.
The lesson understands the socioeconomic pressures bearing down on the language learner. Healing is a luxury if you don't have that permission.
And right alongside that socioeconomic pressure is this profound emotional pressure. The lesson includes this phrase that is just incredibly raw.
Which one?
Is it serious or will it go away soon?
Oh, yeah. That sentence is the ultimate human question seeking comfort.
It is. Think about it. When you are sitting on that crinkly paper on the exam table in a sterile room, listening to a doctor speak a language you only partially understand.
You are terrible.
You don't really care about the Latin name of the virus. You just want the terror to stop. You want them to look you in the eye and say, you are going to be okay.
When a patient asks, is it serious or will it go away soon?
Yeah.
They are not merely asking for a clinical prognosis.
They are pleading for psychological relief.
Yes, they are asking the authority figure to alleviate the crushing weight of their own mortality in that moment.
And the fact that a beginner English course dedicates instructional time to this specific phrase.
It demonstrates remarkable empathy for the emotional interiority of the language learner. They recognize that fear is a core component of the medical experience.
Before the source material completely moves out of the hospital, it does this vocabulary breakdown that I found really unorthodox.
Well, the sensory definitions, yes.
Usually in these types of lessons, you get a word and a sterile dictionary-style definition, but here they define the vocabulary using intensely visceral sensory descriptions.
It's a brilliant pedagogical choice.
Like, they don't define a cough as a respiratory expulsion of air. They define it vividly as when your throat makes a strong noise.
By defining a cough as an auditory event, they are bypassing the complex, abstract medical jargon entirely.
They are anchoring the vocabulary in the raw, undeniable physical reality of the symptom.
Exactly. And they do the same thing with the rest of the list. Fever is simply a high body temperature.
Infection is when bacteria or a virus makes you sick. Pain is just a feeling when something hurts.
Medicine is pills or liquid you take to feel better.
And a prescription is reduced to its physical form, a doctor's paper for medicine.
Even emergency is defined as a very serious and fast health problem. Allergy is when your body reacts badly to something.
It's completely devoid of clinical distance. It's the language of pure function.
Because these words form the foundational lexicon of physical autonomy. By stripping away the clinical complexity, the lesson ensures that the learner can rapidly associate the English word with the physical sensation.
You don't need to understand the mechanism of a virus to know your body is hot and you are in pain.
Right. And once you possess these highly grounded words, you can actively advocate for your own survival.
Okay, so let's assume the medical crisis is managed. The fever is down, you have your prescription, the doctor has answered your question.
Your body is secured.
But now you walk out the sliding glass doors of the hospital clinic, and you are standing on the sidewalk of a sprawling, unfamiliar metropolis.
You are discharged. But now what?
Right. How do you get out of there? This is where the source material executes this brilliant pivot. We transition entirely from the internal geography of the human body to the external, chaotic geography of the city.
It is the natural progression of agency. Once the internal systems are stabilized, the external environment becomes the primary challenge.
You are out in the world and you need to move. So part one of the transit lesson focuses entirely on asking for directions.
Which is an art form in itself.
It really is. The core spatial phrases are things like, I'm looking for the subway entrance. Can you tell me where the nearest bus stop is?
And, excuse me, do you know how I can get to the train station from here?
But what completely fascinates me here isn't the nouns like the subways or the buses. It's the intense, almost theatrical politeness that is baked into the syntax of these questions.
Should you please help me find it?
Yeah. Could you please help me find it? Can
Yeah.
you tell me? Could you please tell me? It is this elaborate verbal handshake you are forced to offer before you can even request the geographical data.
It's fascinating.
Why did we do this? I was trying to imagine walking up to someone and just saying, "Where is the subway?"
Yeah.
It feels incredibly aggressive, even though it's technically the most efficient way to ask.
It feels aggressive because you are violating the unwritten social contract of urban anonymity.
Right, the bubble.
Exactly. In a dense city, everyone is enveloped in an invisible protective bubble. We actively ignore each other to maintain sanity in a crowded space.
So when you approach a stranger to ask for directions,
You are puncturing that bubble. You're an invasive presence. The elaborate politeness, excuse me, could you please, is a sociological shock absorber.
it signals deference.
Yes. You are actively subverting your own status to demonstrate that you are not a physical or social threat.
It's a performance of vulnerability. And the lesson takes this even further with phrases like, "I'm not sure how to get there," and "I'm not familiar with this area."
You are literally confessing your absolute ignorance.
You're walking up to a local, someone who belongs to the environment, and handing them complete power over your trajectory.
You are intentionally disarming yourself. And by explicitly stating your lack of familiarity, you trigger a deeply ingrained psychological response in the local resident.
You transform yourself from an annoyance into a guest in need of a guide.
It is a highly sophisticated linguistic strategy designed to elicit sympathy and activate the stranger's inherent desire to be helpful.
People do love showing off that they know the fastest way to the train station.
They really do. It makes them feel like local experts.
But the psychological tension doesn't vanish just because you find the station. The transcript specifically targets this very modern, very specific anxiety.
Making the wrong choice.
Yes, the fear of the wrong vehicle. They teach the phrase, "Is this the right bus for going downtown, or should I take another one?"
It captures the terror of commitment, doesn't it? Finding the bus stop is only a geographical victory. Boarding the bus is a vector commitment.
Once those doors close, you are locked in.
You are locked into a trajectory. If you have chosen incorrectly, every passing second takes you further away from your intended destination.
You're compounding your error at 40 miles per hour.
Exactly. The lesson empowers the learner to verify their trajectory with a local before they surrender their agency to the machine.
To really illustrate how this plays out, the source material provides a practice dialogue. The learner approaches a worker and asks, "Excuse me, how do I get to the train station?"
And the worker replies with this incredibly dense string of spatial data.
Yeah, they say, "Go straight down the street and take the first left. The train station will be just ahead on your right."
It's a universal direction-giving format.
But when I read that, I realized that asking the question is actually the easy part. The true test is whether you can catch the answer.
That is the fundamental asymmetry of asking for directions in a second language.
Because you can meticulously rehearse the question in your mind, perfect your pronunciation, and execute it flawlessly.
But you have absolutely zero control over the speed, the accent, or the complexity of the answer you receive.
Right. You ask a perfectly formed question, and the local responds by firing a machine gun of geometry at you. Go straight, first left, on your right.
If your brain isn't primed to decode that specific spatial logic, you just end up nodding politely and walking away completely lost.
Which we've all done.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Because decoding that response requires an immense amount of working memory. You have to parse the phonetic string, translate the vocabulary into concepts, and simultaneously construct a three-dimensional map in your mind's eye.
Straight sets the axis.
First, left introduces an intersection and a pivot.
And on your right establishes the final destination relative to your new orientation.
Holding all of those shifting geometric planes in your working memory while physically navigating a crowded street is a monumental cognitive feat.
So the transcript is conditioning the learner not just to speak, but to anticipate the architecture of the reply.
Exactly. It's preparing them for the cognitive load of listening.
So you've survived the cognitive load of the directions. You went straight, you took the left, and the station is right where they said it would be. You've arrived at the threshold.
But geographical arrival is meaningless without economic access.
Yes. This is where the source material transitions us into the transactional reality of transit. Part 2 of the lesson is entirely focused on the economics of the commute.
Buying tickets and understanding fares.
We move from navigating the physical street to navigating the toll booth. Knowing the direction is only half the battle.
Because access to public infrastructure is almost universally gated by a financial transaction. If you cannot execute the transaction, the infrastructure might as well not exist.
So the core phrases they teach here establish the fundamental parameters of your journey. I'd like to buy a one-way ticket to the airport, please. Can you tell me how much it is?
And the alternative, how much is a round-trip ticket to the city center? I'll be coming back later today.
It's the basic binary of travel. Are you severing your tie to this location, or are you tethered to it and planning to return?
Right.
But embedded in this section is a phrase that I spent a long time thinking about. It is easily the most complex sentence in this part of the transcript.
Let's hear it.
The learner is taught to ask, do I need to buy a separate ticket for the bus, or is it included with the subway pass?
Oh.
Now, I have a theory about this. This doesn't feel like a standard beginner language phrase. It feels incredibly specific.
It is.
To me, this feels like a linguistic defense mechanism against the absolute chaos of multi-agency transit maps. You know, where the bus is run by the city, the subway is run by the state, and nothing connects properly. Am I misreading this, or is the lesson actually teaching them how to navigate transit bureaucracy?
Your theory is entirely correct. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reflects the complex, fragmented nature of modern urban transit systems.
It's not just a monolith.
No. In many major global cities, the transit network is a patchwork of competing municipalities, private contractors, and legacy systems. A magnetic card that grants you access to the underground train might be completely invalid on the surface-level bus.
And the signage explaining this is always written in the most confusing, legally dense local language possible.
Precisely. And the penalty for misunderstanding the bureaucracy is severe.
You get fined.
You do. If you board a bus assuming your subway pass is valid and a fare inspector boards at the next stop, you are suddenly facing public humiliation, a hefty financial fine, and potentially even legal trouble.
All due to an innocent misunderstanding of local civic integration.
Exactly. So by equipping the learner with this specific inquiry, is it included with the subway pass, the transcript provides a shield against accidental fare evasion.
It forces the ticket seller to clarify the boundaries of the system before the learner risks stepping out of bounds. It's brilliant. It's teaching you to interrogate the system before you trust it.
It's empowering the learner.
And speaking of interrogating the system, there is another phrase here that acts as a form of active financial defense. The lesson teaches the learner to ask, do you offer a discount for students or senior citizens? I have my student ID with me.
That represents a profound leap in the learner's agency.
They aren't just paying the sticker price.
No, they're moving from passively accepting a stated price to actively advocating for their economic position within a social structure.
I love how it's structured, too. They don't just ask for the discount. They immediately present the proof. I have my ID with me.
It's a proactive justification.
It teaches the learner that the prices flashing on the digital board aren't always fixed monoliths. There are hidden grace periods and social safety nets built into the pricing structure.
But the system will never volunteer them.
Right. You have to know the exact phrase to trigger the discount. You have to demand your inclusion in that demographic.
It requires the learner to assert their identity, I am a student, or I am a senior, and leverage that identity for financial survival.
To ground this, the source material gives us another practice dialogue. It's a very clean transaction. The learner says, "Hi, I need a ticket to the airport, please."
And the seller says, "Sure, that will be $5. Would you like a one-way ticket or a round-trip ticket?"
The learner opts for the one-way, and the price is locked in at $5. But then the lesson introduces the final hurdle of the transaction, which is deeply rooted in modern travel friction.
The payment method.
Yes. The learner asks, "Can I pay with a credit card for my ticket, or do I need cash?"
That question perfectly captures the anxiety of international finance at the ground level.
It's such a relatable dilemma.
Because you can understand the geography, you can agree on the price, but if the machine only accepts local currency coins and you only have a foreign credit card, the transaction fails.
You're stuck at the turnstile.
Knowing how to verify the accepted medium of exchange before you commit to the purchase, before you hold up a line of impatient commuters, is an essential urban survival skill.
So the card is swiped, the ticket prints out, you have secured your right to travel, but this introduces a completely new variable.
You know where you are going, and you've paid for the right to go there.
Oh, when does the journey actually begin? The source material now transitions from the static, spatial reality of the ticket counter into the dynamic, relentless reality of the transit schedule.
We're moving into section 4.
Yes, mastering time and space. The clock is officially ticking.
Time replaces space as the dominant constraint. You are no longer just navigating a map, you are navigating a timetable.
And the timetable does not wait for you to translate your thoughts.
It certainly doesn't.
The phrases in this section are just dripping with temporal anxiety. What time does the last train leave from this station? How often do the trains run to the airport? When is the next subway train to Central Station?
This entire module is built around the fear of missing the window of opportunity.
The practice phrase they highlight is literally, "I need to make sure I don't miss it."
That is the universal anthem of anyone dragging a suitcase through a foreign station.
It really is. This section is entirely about time anxiety.
The psychology of time anxiety in a foreign environment is profound. When a traveler asks, "What time does the last train leave from this station?" they are not merely asking for a data point on a schedule.
What are they asking for?
They are establishing the absolute boundary of their safety.
The point of no return.
Exactly. The last train represents the final pulse of the city's infrastructure. If you miss that train, the system shuts down, and you are effectively locked out of the shelter.
You are stranded.
You are stranded.
Yeah.
The fear isn't just about being late. It is an evolutionary fear of being separated from the tribe and exposed to the elements. By asking for that specific time, the traveler has calculated the exact margin of error they have left for the night.
And as if managing time isn't stressful enough, the lesson forces the learner to confront the most chaotic spatial concept in all of public transit. The transfer. They teach the phrase, "Is there a direct bus that goes to the city center from here, or do I need to transfer?" When I read this, my blood pressure genuinely spiked.
It's incredibly stressful.
I can handle a direct route. You get on, you sit down, you wait. But a transfer is a completely different beast.
A transfer shatters the continuous path. It requires the learner to conceptualize the transit system not as a single linear journey, but as a complex topology of intersecting nodes.
It's an enforced vulnerability point. When you transfer, you have to gather your luggage, disembark from the safety of the vehicle, navigate a chaotic intermediary station,
Locate a new platform.
wait for a new vehicle, and pray that you read the signage correctly. Every transfer multiplies the probability of a catastrophic navigation failure.
The lesson is essentially teaching the learner how to ask, will this journey require me to risk everything in the middle, or am I safe all the way?
It's a risk assessment.
And it highlights the cognitive burden we discussed earlier. A transfer requires the traveler to maintain high situational awareness across multiple distinct environments.
But amidst all this macro-level system anxiety, there is one phrase here that is incredibly personal. The learner is taught to ask, does the bus stop near my hotel? I want to make sure I get off at the right place.
That's a beautiful example of how individuals attempt to domesticate public infrastructure.
I find this so fascinating because a city bus route is this massive, inflexible civic apparatus. It serves thousands of people. It does not care about your specific hotel.
But the language learner is forced to try and bridge the gap between this massive infrastructure and their own tiny micro destination.
You are asking the transit worker or the bus driver to perform a highly complex cognitive task on your behalf.
You are asking them to take their vast encyclopedic knowledge of the city's grid, cross-reference it with the specific location of your private accommodation, and generate a customized set of instructions just for you.
You are demanding that the system acknowledge your personal existence.
And when the system does acknowledge you, the relief is palpable.
It really is. The practice dialogue they use for the scheduling section perfectly captures this exchange of anxiety for comfort.
How does it go?
The learner asks, when is the next subway to Central Station? And the station worker doesn't just say 10 minutes. The taught response is, the next train leaves in 10 minutes, so you have time to catch it.
That addendum, so you have time to catch it, is the crux of the interaction.
It changes everything.
If the worker only provided the raw numerical data, the traveler would still have to perform the mental calculus. Is 10 minutes enough time to find platform 4, carry my bag down the stairs, and pass through the turnstile?
Which just causes more panic.
Exactly. By providing the interpretation of the data, the worker is actively managing the traveler's time anxiety. They are offering a buffer. This highlights a crucial function of language. We rarely exchange pure data. We exchange emotional reassurance.
You have time. It's an absolute gift of a sentence when you're stressed.
It truly is.
Okay, so you have the ticket, you know the schedule, you survived the transfer, and you have finally boarded the correct vehicle. You find a seat, you exhale.
But the tension isn't over.
No. The lesson makes it very clear that being inside a moving metal box introduces a completely new paradigm of vulnerability. This brings us to Section 5 of the outline, asking for help during the ride. The environment is now a moving target.
The physics of your situation have fundamentally changed.
How so?
When you were standing on the platform, an error simply meant you were waiting in the wrong place. Now that you're in motion, you are captive cargo. Every minute that passes is actively altering your geographical coordinates.
If you are on the wrong vector, the system is actively working against you.
Precisely. The stakes literally increase with the velocity of the vehicle.
So the phrases taught here are all about maintaining situational awareness mid-transit. Excuse me, does this bus stop at the airport, or should I get off at the next station?
And could you please let me know when we reach Main Street? I don't want to miss my stop.
But here's where the dynamic completely flips for me. So what does this all mean for the traveler's mindset? Up until this exact moment, every interaction the learner has had has been with a designated authority figure.
Right, a doctor, a triage nurse, a ticket seller.
People who are literally paid to stand behind a desk and help you. But once you are on the bus or the train, those authority figures vanish. They are behind a locked driver's door or back at the station.
You are entirely alone with your fellow passengers.
You're relying entirely on the kindness of fellow passengers here.
Right. This raises an important question about the shift in social power dynamics. You are no longer interacting with an institutional representative. You are forced to rely on the unpredictable goodwill of your peers.
Strangers.
Yes, the unwritten social contract of the public commons dictates that passengers ignore each other. To ask for help on a moving train requires you to actively breach that contract. You must interrupt a stranger who is reading, listening to music, or trying to sleep, and demand their cognitive labor.
You have to tap the shoulder of the person next to you and just pray they aren't having a terrible day.
It's very intimidating.
And the phrase that requires the absolute most courage to say to a stranger is the one they highlight next. I think I'm on the wrong bus. Can you help me figure out which one I need to take?
Oh, that is a tough one.
Just reading that sentence gives me a knot in my stomach. The absolute sinking dread of realizing the landscape out the window doesn't match the map in your head.
It is an admission of profound, catastrophic failure. By uttering that sentence, you are confessing to a stranger that your entire navigational strategy has collapsed and you are currently being transported into unknown territory.
You are completely lost.
But more importantly, it requires the stranger to perform dynamic course correction. You aren't asking them where the station is. You are asking them to halt your current trajectory, analyze your intended destination, and plot an entirely new vector for you from a moving starting point.
It requires immense humility from the speaker and immense cognitive effort from the listener.
Exactly. It's the ultimate moment of vulnerability, requiring immediate course correction mid-journey.
And even if you're on the right bus, the anxiety of the unknown journey length is agonizing. The text teaches the phrase, "How many more stops until we reach my destination?"
The anxiety of counting stops.
Yes. I vividly remember doing this in foreign cities before smartphones had GPS. You sit there, staring intensely at the little faded transit map taped above the doors, physically counting every single time the brakes hiss and the doors open.
It's exhausting.
Okay, that was 3. 4. Wait, the train stopped in a tunnel. Does that count as a stop? Did anyone get on? It's just exhausting.
The cognitive burden of constant vigilance is incredibly draining. You cannot relax. You must maintain a state of hyperarousal to ensure you don't miss your exit.
So teaching the phrase, "Could you please let me know when we reach Main Street," is basically a psychological escape hatch.
It teaches the concept of distributed cognition. You are effectively offloading the burden of vigilance onto a local who already knows the rhythm of the route.
You are conscripting them to be your alarm clock.
Exactly. It's a survival tactic. You tether yourself to someone who actually knows where they're going.
And the practice dialogue 4 that closes out this section delivers the ultimate payoff to all of this anxiety. The learner nervously asks a fellow passenger, "Does the subway go to the airport?"
And the passenger replies, "Yes, it does. Just stay on the train until the last stop."
Stay on the train until the last stop. In the entire lexicon of travel, there is no instruction more comforting.
It is the ultimate abdication of responsibility.
Exactly. It means no transfers, no counting stops, no tapping strangers on the shoulder. You are safely secured in the system, and the system will carry you exactly where you need to be. You can finally close your eyes.
You surrender entirely to the infrastructure, knowing it will safely eject you at your destination. The tension is finally resolved.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis, Section 6, the final review.
Yes, where all these isolated skills flow together in real life.
The source text proves this with a culminating exercise. They don't just leave all these skills sitting in isolated silos. They prove that describing pain, asking directions, handling money, and managing time are all interconnected threads of the same survival fabric.
The transcript ends with this final review conversation.
And it is this beautiful, continuous sequence.
The pedagogical design reaches its apex here. It demonstrates linguistic compounding, the learner's forced to synthesize the discrete modules, the spatial geometry, transactional economics, and temporal awareness into a single, fluid, real-world interaction.
It reads like a choreographed dance. I'll break it down. It starts with spatial navigation. The learner approaches and says, "Excuse me, how do I get to the subway?"
And the worker immediately fires back the spatial logic. Go straight down the street, then turn right at the traffic lights. The subway station will be on your left.
The learner catches the geometry, processes it, and without missing a beat, pivots to the economics. "Thanks for your help. How much is a ticket to the airport?"
The worker replies with the data, $3.50 for a one-way ticket.
And finally, the learner executes the transaction methodology. "Great. Can I pay with my credit card?
And the worker confirms, yes, you can.
The sheer efficiency of that dialogue is remarkable.
It demonstrates linguistic compounding in real time. The learner is no longer just repeating isolated vocabulary words. They aren't just pointing at a map or holding up a $5 bill.
They're orchestrating a multi-step transaction.
They manage their geography, calculate their cost, and negotiate their payment method in one sustained breath.
They aren't reciting lines from a textbook anymore. They are having a highly functional conversation that literally moves them through the physical world.
Exactly. It represents a profound psychological transition. They have graduated from being a passive learner of a language, staring at a workbook, to becoming an active participant in the culture and infrastructure of the city.
They have acquired true agency.
They have.
It is incredibly satisfying to see the arc complete itself. Think about the massive journey we and the hypothetical language learner have been on over the course of this single transcript.
It's an epic arc of survival.
We started in the sterile, high-stakes, terrifying environment of a hospital clinic. We had to figure out how to explain a sharp nocturnal chest pain and declare a lethal penicillin allergy while the room was spinning.
A completely vulnerable state.
And from that point of total physical vulnerability, we journeyed out onto the concrete sidewalks. We navigated the sociology of strangers, calculated multi-agency bus fares, managed the terror of the transfer,
Tracked the moving targets of subway stops.
and made it all the way to successfully swiping a foreign credit card for a $3.50 one-way ticket to the airport.
What this source material ultimately proves is that language, when stripped of its academic pretensions, is fundamentally a tool for survival and connection.
It really is.
We so often treat language learning as a luxury, memorizing complex verb conjugations to read literature or ordering wine on vacation. But this transcript aggressively strips all of that away to reveal the raw, unpolished reality.
The survival mechanic.
Yes. The most important words any human being will ever learn are not philosophical. They are not poetic. They are the highly utilitarian, desperate, high-stakes phrases that get us healed when our bodies are breaking down, get us found when we are hopelessly lost, and get us back home before the system shuts down for the night.
It is the absolute bedrock of the human experience. Which leads me to a final thought I want to leave you, our listener, to mull over today as you go out into the world.
A provocative thought.
Yeah. We've spent this entire deep dive analyzing the structural mechanics and the cognitive load of these beginner English phrases. We've looked at them as survival tools for a foreigner.
Right.
But if you take a step back, if you strip away all of your native slang, all of your complex professional jargon, your witty banter, your sarcasm, and the poetry of your everyday fluent language, aren't we all just walking around the world essentially saying the exact same four things?
I hurt. I'm lost. How much does this cost?
Yeah,
And can you help me get home?
exactly. It really makes you wonder how much of our daily, complex, incredibly nuanced communication is really just sophisticated, polite dressing layered on top of those four basic, desperate human pleas.
That's a humbling thought.
It's like we are all still just mashing those exact same basic survival cheat codes into the controller day after day, just with a much larger vocabulary.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep paying close attention to the words you choose, keep navigating your own maps, and keep exploring the world around you. We will be right here next time to unpack whatever comes next.